Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. In today's video I'm going to be reviewing the brand new John Lennon documentary Borrowed Time, directed by Alan G. Parker. Lennon documentaries at the moment, it's either feast or famine. We don't get one for years and then we get two within the same month. It's only like a few weeks ago that One to One come out, and now we've got Borrowed Time, which has a strapline of Lennon's last decade. Now, before I get into talking about the film, I want to talk about the availability of the film if you want to go and see it. Now, as far as I know, at the moment it is only in cinemas in the UK. It is planned to be shown in cinemas overseas, but at the moment it's not. You might have to wait a couple of weeks until that happens. But if you are in the UK, the cinemas that it's being shown in at the moment are few and far between. I had to drive about 35 minutes to go and see this film, and you know, there's not that many cinemas showing it, so you need to check your listings to see whether your local cinema or where the nearest cinema is that is showing this film. But if you do live in an area nowhere near a cinema that's showing the film, or even in a country that's not showing the film just yet, don't worry, you don't have to wait too long to see this film, because the film is going almost directly to physical media, DVD and Blu-ray within a month. I think 9th of June the DVD and Blu-ray are available, and there are two cuts of this film: the theatrical cut, which is about 2 hours and 10 minutes, and the director's cut, that is about 3.5 hours, and both of these will be on the DVD and Blu-ray. So if you can't get to cinema, you'll be able to pick this up from June the 9th. So I went to see it on Friday, May the 2nd, which was the opening night, and really disappointingly, there were only 3 of us in the cinema, which was really disappointing for a brand new John Lennon documentary. Just 3 of us. When I saw One to One, it was absolutely packed. Would you believe it? I booked my ticket online. And would you believe that one of the other 2 people in the cinema was sitting in the seat that I booked? I mean, it didn't really matter because there's like 200 empty seats there, so I just went and sat somewhere else. But that was a little bit weird. But never mind. Now, Borrowed Time is not an official John Lennon documentary. In other words, it's not authorised by the John Lennon estate or by Apple or anyone like that, which means that they can't use any John Lennon or Beatles music in this film. Which, you know, when you're doing a documentary about a musician, that gives you a few hoops to jump through, I think. And I understand the difficulty of trying to tell a story about a musician, because it's without having any music to use, because that's how we have to do it on YouTube. We're not allowed to use any unauthorized music either. So I understand how difficult it is to make a documentary of this sort without any music, and how Alan G. Parker gets around this is with a huge selection of still photographs and archival video footage, but also with the extensive use of talking heads. Now, I know that a lot of you don't like documentaries with talking heads. We saw a lot of that when Beatles 64 came out, and people complained about the talking heads, and the reason for that was that they got completely the wrong people. They got people that were pretty much irrelevant to the story. So my opinion on this is that if you get the right talking heads, then they can become invaluable to the telling of the story. And I had a telephone conversation with the director, Alan G. Parker, at the back end of last year, and he told me that he had a criteria for the people that they interviewed for this, and that was that they had to know John Lennon personally or professionally for about 5 years, and in most cases that is correct. Now, there's some people here that you probably won't have heard of. I hadn't heard of them, but there are some that you will have heard of, but they've all got a story to tell. So I'm going to get into that right now. Now, I don't want to give away too many spoilers because I want you to see it for yourself and see what you think of it. But there are some real golden moments in this film that I do want to talk about. There's also some bits that I was a little bit disappointed that were included in the film as well, and I'll talk about those as well. But I feel that the film's greatest asset happens right at the beginning of the film, and that is where they talk about the proposed tour for 1981, and it's quite a long section and it's quite detailed as well, and we get to find out pretty much all there is to know about the tour apart from the set list. Now, the tour manager for the 1981 tour was the beautifully named Henry the Horse Smith, and he tells this story about how John suggested to him that they get Bill Graham to promote the tour. And Henry the Horse Smith says, well, what do you need a promoter for? You don't need to spend money on a promoter. You're John Lennon. You're not going to have any trouble selling out this tour. And when you think about it, he's absolutely right, because John had never done a solo tour up to this point. In fact, he'd only done a handful of gigs. You can probably count them on one hand. You know, you've got the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival concert that turned out to be, you know, the Live Peace in Toronto album. You've got the 2 one-to-one shows. You've got the Lyceum show that he did in 1969. You've got the thing that he did with Frank Zappa at the Fillmore East. He did a couple of, benefit things, political rallies in 1972, the John Sinclair rally and the Attica State benefit. He did the, he turned up at Elton John's gig at Madison Square Garden in 1974, and he did the tribute to Lou Grade thing in 1975. So, probably about 10 times that he's been live in public, which is not many. So if he announces a world tour, he's not going to have any trouble selling it out. And we find out lots about this tour because we heard John talk about him wanting to go on tour in the Andy Peebles interview that he did on the 6th of December 1980. But it was all a little bit pie in the sky now. Now we've got some real meat on the bones about what this tour was going to look like, and how it was going to be done. They interviewed someone whose name I've forgotten now, who basically designed the stage set, and they managed to get his drawings of the stage set and then recreate the whole stage thing using animation, so you could actually see what it looked like as a moving image sort of thing. And for 1980, it was like really, really advanced. I know that some of the huge bands like Pink Floyd around that time had great great stage setups and stuff like that. But the norm was not to have anything that technical. And from the mock-up of the stage, we see that there were video screens right across the back of the stage, which is is the norm now. If you go and see Paul McCartney now, you'll see video screens behind the band and to the side of the band. But in 1980, this wasn't the norm. I mean, I saw Paul McCartney quite a few times in 1979, and there was no video screens at all. And they also had the setup with these sort of cantilever cranes that had screens on them that would go out into the audience. Now we see these sort of cranes with cameras on and stuff like that at gigs all the time these days, but in 1980 this wasn't the norm, and John said that he wants to give Mick and Elton ulcers over the shows that he was doing. And the idea of these cranes were according to what we were told in the film, was that they were gonna, John and Yoko would go to whichever city the gig was going to be in, maybe a day or a couple of days before the gig, and do kind of a walkabout in the city, and that would be filmed and that would be shown on these screens that would come out into the audience on the cranes. Now the proposed venue that they talked about, and it's the only venue that they talked about, although Earl Slick, who he's interviewed here. He says that all the dates for the tour were already cast in stone by about October 1980, but the only venue that they actually talk about is Earl's Court in London. Now, and they showed the outside of Earl's Court, and I recognised it straight away, and because it's a huge cavernous place. Earl's Court was probably the most likely venue because it was the biggest music venue or indoor arena in the UK at that time. It held about 10,000 people. Wembley Arena held about 8,000 back then, but Earl's Court about 10,000. It was a huge cavernous place. If you ever went to a gig there, the sound was terrible, but it was a huge place. And on the outside of the walls of Earl's Court, we saw what it would look like if you were approaching the venue going to the gig on the night, because it had like the big posters going down the side of the building, which had a picture of John and Yoko and the words one world, one people, or one people, one world. I can't remember which way around it was, which presumably was the name of the tour. Maybe they hadn't come up with the name of the tour and that was just for the benefit of the film. I'm not sure, but that was how it looked. Now, when Earl Slick was interviewed, now if you don't know, Earl Slick played on Double Fantasy. He also used to be the lead guitarist for David Bowie for years and years and years. And he spoke about the fact that the pretty much the entire lineup that appeared on Double Fantasy had been signed up to be the band on the tour. The problem that he had was that he was already booked to go on tour in 1981, and he was concerned that he wouldn't be able to do it, and John wanted him on the tour. John said to him, if I can square it with your record label and move a few things around, would you would you be able to do it? And he said, yeah, of course he wanted to do it. So, and also mentioned Wembley as a venue, and I think that might be him misremembering it, because the only thing they talked about was Earl's Court, or the only thing that we saw was Earl's Court. But it was fantastic to be able to see what the stage would have looked like for this tour. As I say, the only thing we didn't really know about the tour was the set list. It would have been fantastic if they'd had the set list, but it was clear that this tour was going to probably start in March 1981 with the album that turned out to be Milk and Honey maybe coming out while they were on tour. I don't know how many venues were booked, but as I say, Earl Slick said that all the dates were booked by October 1980. Straight after the talk about the tour, we then go straight back to 1966 and the Bigger Than Jesus conference, and then some Beatles stuff leading up to the time when John and Yoko leave for New York, which adds a little bit of context to the story, but it's a well-trodden path that we've seen before. And talking about that, adding context, there is a lot in this film that goes unexplained, things that is it assumes that people have a thorough knowledge of John Lennon, know the story inside out. But if you're like a young person trying to find out about John Lennon's life, or just a casual fan or member of the public that don't know the ins and outs, you're going to hear things like the Lost Weekend and a Toot and a Snore in '74 and not have a clue what these things mean or are, because they're not explained in the film. And I don't think that's a great a great positive for the film. Let's talk about some of the some of the talking heads. Bob Harris was excellent. He was really great. Tells a great story, and he looks great. He looks better now than he did in the 70s, probably because he's had his teeth done. But he tells the story about the interview that John did for the Old Grey Whistle Test in 1975, where John is in such a good mood. He doesn't even want paying for this interview. And Bob tells this story that he says, "Hang on a minute, John. This is the BBC. We've got procedures here. We've got to pay you." And he said, "Well, what's the minimum amount you can pay me?" And Bob Harris says £15. So he says, well, instead of paying me £15, just get me like £15 worth of chocolate Olivers. And there are clips from there are several clips from the 1975 interview that Bob Harris did with John, and he does mention about how much he misses chocolate Olivers in that interview. Andy Peebles, he is there, and Andy Peebles comes across a little bit cocky, if I'm honest. You know, he tells a couple of stories where I think, I don't really believe that you said that. So the first one is when he arrives at the Hit Factory to do the interview in December 1980. You know, John welcomes him and says, "Thank you so much for coming all this way to speak to us." And you know, Andy Peebles says, "Oh, don't be silly, you idiot." I don't believe that a young Andy Peebles would have called John an idiot on their first meeting, or, you know, within the first few minutes of meeting him. I just don't believe that would have happened. And he tells a similar story where he gets a phone call when he gets back to the UK after the interview. Gets a phone call from George Martin. And George Martin invites him over to come to his studios, and Andy Peebles says, "Certainly, sir." And George Martin said, "You know, please don't call me sir." And Andy Peebles then says, "I'll call you sir if I want to." And I don't believe he would be that ingenuous, you know, to someone like George Martin. I don't believe that. But the reason why he's been called over to Air Studios is because Paul McCartney's there, and Paul wants to speak to Andy Peebles and ask him whether he thinks that John still loves him. So that's that story. Now, there are other authors. Barry Miles is there, Philip Norman is there, Tony Palmer is there as well, and Ken Womack, who makes a really good contribution to this film, says some good things, liked that as well. But unfortunately, Ray Connolly, I don't know what his beef is, but he's got beef. So Ray Connolly doesn't see John and Yoko all through the house husbandy period, that period 75 to 1980, doesn't see him at all. Yet he wants to dispel the story. He doesn't believe that John is looking after Sean and bringing him up. He doesn't believe that he's baking bread. You know, he says he's sitting around doing smack. Well, he wasn't there. He doesn't know this. This story cannot be corroborated. So why has it been included in the film? You know, I just don't understand that. You know, he says, well, they had staff for that. Yeah, well, of course they had staff. I mean, John has never claimed that, you know, he ran around the Dakota with a vacuum cleaner or polished the cut glass or anything like that. But we've seen plenty of footage of John looking after Sean, and photos of John looking after Sean and baking bread and all that sort of thing. So those things happened. Connolly's opinion on what went on at the Dakota during the house husband years cannot be corroborated, and it feels a little bit like a hot take for the sake of a hot take. And personally, if a story can't be corroborated, then I wouldn't have included it in the film. But we then move on to the night of the murder, and one of Alan G. Parker's rules about this film is that, you know, no one was allowed to mention the name of the assassin, and I totally concur with that opinion. Now, one of the most emotional moments of the film was the interview with Laurie Kay. Laurie Kay did the final interview with Dave Sholin at the Dakota on December the 8th. And she tells the story where she comes out of the Dakota and she was approached by the assassin and knew straight away that he was a nut job, because he approached her and said, what did he say? What did he say? Did you get to meet him? Did you get his autograph? What did he say? What did he say? And she knew that he was a loony, and she obviously didn't know that he had a gun inside his coat. But you know, she said, you know, I knew that there was something wrong with this guy, but there was no police around the Dakota at that time in the afternoon to get him removed. And you know, she's still, even now, when she's doing this interview now, she's still beating herself up about the fact that if there had been a cop there, they could have got him away. And this would never have happened, and John would still be with us, and we would have had, you know, we wouldn't have been robbed of 40 odd years of John Lennon's life and John Lennon's music. And that was a really emotional part of the film. Of her, she got very upset as she was recalling this story, that if there was a possibility to have stopped this senseless murder, then she could have done it. If there was, someone that she could have got, if she could have got him removed from around the Dakota, it all could have been avoided. It then cuts to a young journalist who was young at the time, Alan Weiss, who worked for NBC, who was lucky enough to get hit by a cab on the same night. So he ends up in the Roosevelt Hospital on a trolley, and he can gather by what is being said about him that that John Lennon has been shot and is in the hospital, and he's a journalist, and he tells this long sort of self-serving story how he needs to break the news, even though he's on a trolley. He's been hit by a cab, and that story kind of went on too long really, and was a little bit boring. I'm not going to tell you the actual quotes, because I don't want to spoil it. Jerry Cagle, who's a good friend of John for many years, and he is the guy who actually set up that final interview at the Dakota, because the radio station wouldn't fund it, so he funded it. He funded it himself for Dave Sholin and Laurie Kay to do that interview. And he tells a couple of stories. An encounter with Elton John in the toilet, which made me laugh. But I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'll leave it to that. But he also has the final word in the film, and it's a very profound and emotional thing that he says, and I'm not going to tell you that either, because that will spoil it. But it's a good ending to the film. Now, I'm not going to tell you any more about the film. I'm just going to say that I did enjoy it. I think the film has some good, as I say, it has some really good bits in it, some not so good bits in it, but I was never bored throughout the 2 hours 10 minutes or however long it was. And I'm probably going to go and see it again on Wednesday, and I will certainly be buying the Blu-ray to see the director's cut. But as I say, it moves at a very fast pace. As I say, it has got its failings, but it's got its good bits as well. And I would recommend that people see it and make their own mind up about the film. I'm not sure how many people have seen the film so far, because I haven't seen any other reviews on YouTube, but if you have seen the film, please tell me down in the comments what you thought of it, because I'd love to know what you thought of the film. And I do read all your comments, and I will respond to all your comments as well. A little bit of housekeeping: please take 1 second of your life to give this video a like, because it really does help get my videos out there, and helps the channel enormously if you give it a like. So I would really appreciate that. It'd be doing me a big favour. And if you've stumbled across this channel for the first time and you're not subscribed, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Love to have you along for the ride. And if you are finding this video for the first time and you've got this far in the video, you will notice that you haven't seen any adverts mid-roll during this film. That's because I don't have any adverts in the middle of my videos, which is another great reason to subscribe. Okay, well, that is it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.